To understand any person, we must often look back to where they came from. We must see the world through their eyes as a child. For Herod Antipas, born around 20 BC, this world was one of immense power, luxury, and danger. He was a son of the formidable king Herod the Great. His name echoed across Judea with both awe and terror. Antipas grew up within the gilded cages of his father's palaces in Jerusalem, Jericho. He was one of many, born to Malchus, a Samaritan woman, and one of Herod's 10 wives. This web of half-brothers and competing mothers shaped his early lessons in survival and ambition. Life in his father's court was a masterclass in political maneuvering. The air was thick with whispers of conspiracy and the threat of betrayal. Herod the Great was a brilliant builder and a ruthless ruler who might execute suspected sons. Antipas, Archelaus, Philip were sent to Rome for education. It was a political move. In Rome they served under the watchful eye of Emperor Augustus. They would learn the ways of Roman power, build connections, and serve as well-kept hostages. This education gave Antipas an appreciation for Greco-Roman culture and a keen understanding of power in the empire's heart. Antipas was never the clear heir. His mother Malthace lacked royal priestly lineage, lowering his rank. Alexander, Aristobulus, sons of Mariamne. Antipas watched as they were groomed, then executed by their father's paranoia. The lesson: be too prominent, be too popular, and you invite destruction. He learned to be patient, observant, and to navigate the court with quiet cunning, earning the nickname the Fox. His youth became a delicate balancing act. He had to be loyal and competent, yet not so ambitious as to arouse his aging father's suspicion. These years between Jerusalem and Rome did not make a warrior king. Instead, they made a survivor, a politician and a cautious man. The death of a powerful king often unleashes a storm. The passing of Herod the Great in 4 BC was no exception. The final years of his reign were consumed by paranoia and a frantic rewriting of his last will and testament. The question of succession became a life-and-death game for his remaining sons. In an earlier version of his will, Herod the Great had named Antipas as his sole heir, a stunning promotion that would have made him the next king of the Jews. For a brief moment, the quiet, observant son was poised to inherit everything, but the king's mind was a shifting landscape of favor and suspicion. In his final days, swayed by court intrigue or a change of heart, Herod revised his will one last time. This final document shattered Antipas's dream of becoming a king in his father's image. Instead, the kingdom was to be divided among 3 of his sons. The largest and most significant portion was given to Antipas's full brother, Archelaus, Judea, Samaria, Idumea, with the title of ethnarch, a rank just below king. Another half-brother, Philip, was granted the territories to the northeast. To Antipas fell the lands of Galilee, Perea, a region across the Jordan River. He was given the lesser title of tetrarch, which literally means ruler of a fourth part. The promise of a unified kingdom under his rule had vanished, replaced by a fractured inheritance and a diminished title. The matter was not settled in Jerusalem. The final word belonged to Rome. So Antipas, along with his brothers Archelaus and Philip, journeyed once more to the imperial city to plead their cases before Emperor Augustus. It was a scene of intense family drama played out on the world stage. Antipas argued against his brother Archelaus, claiming he was unfit to rule and citing his brutal suppression of a revolt in Jerusalem. He lobbied to have his father's earlier will, the one that made him king, honored. But Augustus, ever the pragmatist, chose to largely uphold the final testament. He confirmed the division of the kingdom, granting the titles as Herod had wished. For Antipas, it was a bitter defeat. He had lost the crown, but he had survived and secured a domain of his own. Returning to his new tetrarchy, Antipas was no longer just a prince living in his father's shadow. He was a ruler in his own right, albeit of a smaller divided territory. His domain of Galilee was a fertile and populated land, a crossroads of trade and ideas, while Perea was more rural and strategically important. He was no longer waiting for power, he now wielded it. This moment marked the true beginning of his long reign, a reign that would last for more than 4 decades. The sting of being denied the title of king would never truly leave him, and this ambition, this desire to reclaim the full glory of his father's title, would drive many of his future actions, both brilliant and disastrous. Having secured his rule over Galilee and Perea, Herod Antipas set out to prove he was his father's son, in ambition and vision. Herod the Great was the master builder. Antipas sought to follow him. Cities were more than buildings, statements of power centers of culture, engines of commerce. His first major project, rebuild Sepphoris damaged after his father's death. He transformed it into a fortified, beautiful city renamed Autocratoris, belonging to the emperor. A clear gesture of loyalty to Rome. He made it his first capital, a Hellenistic jewel in Jewish Galilee. His grandest vision came next. Around 20 AD he began a new city on the Sea of Galilee's western shore. He named it Tiberias for Emperor Tiberius, political flattery. Built in Greco-Roman style, stadium, a palace, likely a theater, a declaration of modernity and power. The location was controversial. It included an ancient cemetery which under Jewish law made the city ritually unclean. Many devout Jews refused to live there. Antipas populated it with foreigners, freedmen, people from across his domain. Through these projects, Antipas brought relative peace and prosperity. Galilee flourished, fishing, agriculture, trade. Roads linked the Mediterranean to the east. He minted his own coins, a sign of semi-autonomy but avoided human images out of religious caution. He was a shrewd diplomat with Rome managing complex internal politics. Not a warrior like his father but a political operator. Infrastructure, diplomacy, a firm, stable hand. His court in Tiberias became Hellenistic and cultured, attracting scholars and artists. He positioned himself as a bridge between Jewish subjects and the powerful Roman world. He was building a legacy, not just cities but memory. He sought to be remembered as a wise, effective ruler. For years it seemed he might succeed, stable tetrarchy, secure ties with Rome, a seaside capital that testified to his ambition. For all his political savvy and careful diplomacy, there was one area where Herod Antipas allowed his personal desires to overshadow his judgment: his marriage. His first wife was the daughter of King Aretas IV of Nabatea, a powerful Arab kingdom to the south and east of his lands. This was a strategic political alliance, a common practice among rulers of the time. The marriage secured his southern border and maintained peace with a formidable neighbor. For years, this arrangement served its purpose, contributing to the stability of Antipas's reign. All seemed well until a fateful trip to Rome changed the course of his life, and the destiny of his kingdom, forever. While in Rome, Antipas stayed with his half-brother, who was also named Herod, Herod II, Herod Philip I. There, he encountered his brother's wife, Herodias. She was a woman of immense ambition and royal blood, being the granddaughter of Herod the Great. To Antipas, she must have seemed like the perfect partner. She was sharp, politically astute, and shared his royal lineage. A powerful attraction ignited between them. They made a pact. Antipas would divorce his current wife, the daughter of King Aretas, and Herodias would leave his brother to marry him. It was a scandalous plan, a flagrant violation of both personal loyalty and religious law. The consequences of this decision were immediate and severe. Antipas's first wife learned of the plot. Fearing for her life, she arranged to travel to the fortress of Machaerus, near the border of her father's kingdom, and from there she fled home to Nabatea. When she told her father, King Aretas IV, of the humiliation and betrayal, he was enraged. The insult was not just personal, it was a public dishonoring of his daughter and his entire kingdom. The political alliance that had kept the peace for years was shattered in an instant. Aretas began to look for an opportunity to exact his revenge, and the seeds of a future war were sown along Antipas's southern border. The scandal did not end there. When Antipas returned to Galilee with Herodias as his new wife, he created a firestorm of moral and religious outrage among his Jewish subjects. According to Jewish law, specifically Leviticus chapter 20 verse 21, it was forbidden for a man to marry his brother's wife. The union was seen as incestuous and profoundly immoral. The common people were scandalized, and religious leaders were incensed. Antipas, who had always tried to balance his Hellenistic tastes with respect for Jewish tradition, had now openly defied one of its core tenets. This deeply unpopular marriage created a rift between the ruler and his people, and it gave a powerful voice to his most outspoken critic. Into this tense atmosphere of moral outrage stepped a figure of immense spiritual authority, John the Baptist. John emerged from the wilderness preaching repentance, purification, the imminent coming of God's judgment. Baptism in the Jordan River, a symbolic washing away of sins. His uncompromising words drew massive crowds. Judea, Galilee. People admired his ascetic lifestyle and his fearless condemnation of sin. A voice for the voiceless, a moral compass for a troubled time. His influence grew daily. He confronted power, publicly condemned Herod Antipas's marriage to Herodias, called it unlawful and adulterous, stirring the scandalized populace. For Antipas, this was a direct challenge to his authority. John looked like a potential leader of revolt. Remembering crowd volatility after his father's death, Antipas grew nervous. He saw John as both critic and a political threat to his tetrarchy. Caught between fear of John's influence and fear of provoking an uprising, Antipas chose a middle path. He had John arrested, imprisoned in the fortress of Machaerus, the same stronghold his first wife had fled. Perhaps he hoped silence would end the movement, yet Josephus says Antipas was sometimes perplexed and intrigued by John. Herodias nursed a bitter grudge. John had publicly shamed her and declared her marriage illegitimate. She waited for a chance to rid herself of him. That chance came at a lavish birthday banquet for Antipas. Salome danced for the tetrarch, the young daughter of Herodias. Antipas was enchanted. He swore to give her anything she asked, up to half his kingdom. Prompted by her mother, Salome asked for a horrifying prize. She asked for the head of John the Baptist on a platter. Antipas was trapped. He was distressed. He may have held a grudging respect for John, but he had made a public oath before his most important guests. To break it would show weakness. With a heavy heart, he ordered the execution. A soldier was sent to the dungeons, returned with the prophet's head, ending the voice that had dared to challenge a king. The execution of John the Baptist did not end Herod Antipas's troubles with prophetic figures. Soon after, a new teacher from Galilee began to attract even larger crowds and generate more astonishing reports. This was Jesus of Nazareth, whose ministry began with his own baptism by John. The news of Jesus' teachings and miracles spread like wildfire throughout Galilee, reaching the ears of the tetrarch in his palace at Tiberias. The reports were so extraordinary that a superstitious and guilt-ridden Antipas grew deeply disturbed. He began to wonder if this Jesus was actually John the Baptist, risen from the dead, and perhaps to haunt him for his crime. In Luke, when Jesus is warned that Antipas wants to kill him, he says, "Go tell that fox, I will keep on driving out demons and healing people today and tomorrow, and on the third day I will reach my goal." The term fox was a clever and layered insult. In Jewish thought, a fox could be seen as a cunning but ultimately minor and destructive creature, not a noble lion like a true king. It implied Antipas was sly and dangerous but also insignificant in the grand scheme of God's plan. It was a powerful dismissal of the tetrarch's earthly authority. The two men would eventually meet face to face, but not in Galilee. Their encounter took place in Jerusalem during the final, fateful Passover of Jesus' life. After his arrest, Jesus was brought before the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate. When Pilate learned Jesus was a Galilean, he saw a political opportunity. Since Galilee was under Antipas's jurisdiction, and Antipas happened to be in Jerusalem for the festival, Pilate sent Jesus to him. This let Pilate avoid a difficult decision and curry favor with the tetrarch. Antipas, for his part, was delighted. He had long been curious about this man and hoped to see him perform a miracle. The meeting, however, was a profound disappointment for the tetrarch. Jesus refused to answer any of his questions or perform any sign. He stood before the ruler of Galilee in complete and resolute silence. For Antipas, who was used to a world of words, power plays, and spectacle, this silent defiance was baffling and frustrating. Seeing that he would get nothing from his prisoner, Antipas and his soldiers mocked Jesus, dressing him in an elegant robe to ridicule his claim to kingship, and then sent him back to Pilate. Antipas refused to condemn Jesus, passing the responsibility back to the Roman governor. In this crucial moment, the cunning fox chose political caution over moral judgment, washing his hands of a matter that would change the course of human history. The consequences of Herod Antipas's scandalous divorce and his execution of John the Baptist were slow to mature, but they were inevitable. The spurned king Aretas IV of Nabatea had not forgotten the insult. He waited for the right moment to strike. The opportunity arose from a border dispute. Aretas launched a full-scale military attack on Antipas's forces. The resulting war was a complete disaster for Antipas. His army was utterly defeated, a devastating blow to his prestige and power. Many of his Jewish subjects saw the defeat as divine retribution for the execution of the righteous John the Baptist. His authority, already damaged, was now severely weakened. Shamed, Antipas appealed to his patron Emperor Tiberius for help. Tiberius ordered the governor of Syria to march against Aretas. It seemed Roman power would save Antipas. But fate intervened. News arrived from Rome. Tiberius was dead. The campaign was halted. Antipas was left humiliated and exposed. His reputation lay in tatters. The final act was driven by two forces, his wife Herodias and his own desire for a greater title. Caligula granted the title of king to Agrippa I. Herodias was consumed with jealousy. She could not bear that her brother Agrippa now outranked her husband. She relentlessly pushed Antipas to go to Rome and ask Caligula for the same title. Reluctantly, Antipas agreed. Agrippa sent a messenger ahead with letters accusing Antipas of treason. The letters alleged secret weapon stockpiles and plotting with the Parthians. Antipas faced Caligula in 39 AD to answer charges of treason. The erratic emperor was convinced. Caligula stripped Antipas of his tetrarchy, his wealth, his power. He handed Galilee and Perea to Agrippa. Antipas was exiled to a remote town in Gaul, modern-day France. Herodias surprisingly joined him in exile rather than accept her brother's pardon. In obscurity, the man who had ruled over 40 years, who had built cities, and who had challenged prophets, lived out his last days. The cunning fox had been cornered, ending not with a crown, but with the quiet shame of exile.